Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. It's the post-game pod. The question of the day, why did Game 2 have to look so much like the Game 1 loss for the Wolves? We'll break down more of the same disappointing results for the Timberwolves as they fall down 0-2 in the Western Conference Finals to OKC. It's all coming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. The Timberwolves, Game 2, Thursday night, looked a lot like Game 1 on Tuesday night. So many similarities. We'll talk about that, and not in a good way, of course. They lost both games by double digits. There were a lot of the same stuff. Some things that were a little better, some things that were worse, certainly. Julius, Randle. We'll get into all that on the show today as we try and figure out like what could look different in Game 3 when the Wolves get back to Target Center to give the Wolves a fighting shot in this series. So we'll break all that down today on the show. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. And of course, you can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So check this out. All the things that were extremely similar between Game 1 and Game 2. Minnesota in a decent spot late in the second quarter completely falls apart at the end of the first half. They gave up, I think, like a 5-0 run in the last 25 seconds. Bad turnover, or the Donte DiVincenzo offensive foul. Yeah, it was a flop by Dort. It was also a poorly executed screen by Donte DiVincenzo. Letter of the law, it's an offensive foul. Was it accentuated? Yeah. The Thunder do a lot of that. And it's not fun to watch, but it was smart in that moment. That was a smart play. The Wolves give up a bucket on the other end. It's a 5-0 run for OKC, and the Wolves are down at halftime of this one by 8. They were up 4 at halftime of the game the other night, but they were up 9 in Game 1 in the final minute. They gave up a run, like a 6-2 run or something to close the half, and ended up only being, however that math works out, they ended up being up 4 at halftime. In this case, it was a closer game, and instead of being down only like 3, they were down 8 at halftime. That was the end of the second quarter. Then in the third quarter, the Thunder turned it up to 11. Third quarter on Tuesday night in Game 1 was 32-18 OKC. In this game, it's 35-21. And while turnovers weren't a big issue in the first half for Minnesota in this game, they became a big issue in the second half. And as we see OKC do, they've done this to everybody throughout the year, especially at home. It completely snowballs. Just an absolute avalanche in the third quarter, and Minnesota feeds into that with turnovers, which, again, weren't a massive problem early in this game. They only had, 4 or something at halftime, and they finished the game as a team. Minnesota had 14 turnovers, which, again, after 18 in Game 1, not a terrible number, but when OKC scores 22 points off those 14 turnovers, and that leads they end up with 16 fast break points overall in this game. You're just feeding into that by turning the ball over. And there were some bad ones mixed in there. Julius Randle was a major culprit. Reid had a couple of really bad ones. Ant, not quite as bad. Ant didn't. And actually didn't have any turnovers in this game. Julius Randle had some bad ones, and Nas had some bad ones. Donte was really bad. I think he had 3 in the first half. He had 3 of the Wolves, I think, had 5 turnovers in the first half, and he had 3 of them. The turnovers feed into it in the third quarter. OKC builds a double-digit lead just like happened the other night. A little different in this one that the Wolves actually were able to show a bit of fight in the fourth quarter. They did end up playing small, and it was because Julius Randle had such a terrible night, and they also needed more offense when they were down by 24 early in the fourth quarter. And Minnesota got OKC into the penalty early in the fourth quarter, which is actually, that segues into what I wanted to talk about here in the first segment. And by the way, the Wolves did get it down to 10 points. It never got closer, but they showed fight, and that was good. And there's also some stuff that I think we could pull out and apply this forward to Game 3 and beyond. One of them is the physicality they played with on both ends of the floor in the fourth quarter. I know they played pretty well in the first quarter of this game, and I I thought the offensive execution was good overall. I thought the defense was pretty active overall late in the first quarter. They forced non-SGA players to take threes. Like Cason Wallace attempted a couple of threes, and he's a good enough shooter, but you'd rather have a semi-contested Cason Wallace three than anything that SGA is doing. Kenrich Williams only played 2 minutes at the end of the first quarter. That was it, and they forced him into a three-point attempt. Like, that defense showed back up again in the fourth quarter when they were already down 20 plus. And Minnesota was physical on the perimeter. They were actually getting into the jersey of Thunder players like OKC's been doing to Minnesota through the first two games of the series, and being aggressive on the perimeter, forcing the ball out of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's hands. And a lot of that, they actually put two on the ball, kind of similar to what they did in the fourth quarter, that massive comeback they had in February against OKC when they were down 24. It came all the way back and won in overtime. They did a bit more of that in the fourth quarter. And on the offensive side of the ball, Minnesota got OKC into the penalty early in the fourth quarter. And that actually led to Minnesota shooting more free throws in this game than Oklahoma City, which I never thought is a thing that would happen. And if you watched, Minnesota had one free throw in the first half. I think OKC only had like 8, but still Minnesota had 1 in the first half. They had 25 in the second half. And a lot of that was because they were getting non-shooting fouls, but had already gotten the Thunder into the penalty. And that was because Minnesota was actually trying to turn the corner, be aggressive on the perimeter, instead of trying to kind of short circuit, have a workaround of like, let's dump the ball into the high post and work off of that, where OKC can dig at it. And they're in rotation, but they kind of want to be in rotation. And we try to, they're going to front or whatever, and we're going to try and throw a lob over the top to Julius, Randle, or Rudy, and they're just going to get stripped as soon as they bring the ball down below their waist. Instead of that, how about, Anthony Edwards and even Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jaden McDaniels, who both had success doing this in the fourth quarter, just turn the corner and put pressure on the defense. And this officiating crew, I thought, did a better job than the game one crew, at least in terms of calling some of that stuff on the perimeter. I should also point out, as long as I mentioned officiating, the fourth quarter was different than the first three quarters because, I do think Minnesota being a little more aggressive, just trying to get around on the perimeter, trying to get their head and shoulders past guys. The officiating was it was being called tighter in the fourth quarter than it was in the first three. Overall, though, not a terrible job by the Scott Foster, Tony Brothers. I can't remember who the third official was. Pat Frayer, maybe. Better than it was in game one. I thought they did a better job. They had more control of the game. The SJ stuff is still insane. I'll talk a little bit about that later. But I thought for the most part, that aggressiveness the Wolves played with on both ends, on the perimeter specifically in the fourth quarter, was a breath of fresh air, first of all. And while it is a little bit dicey, I talked about this a bit on Thursday's show. I played the clip from Matt Moore on Locked On NBA. He talked about how the Wolves cannot beat the Thunder by playing small, by playing their game. I don't know that I fully buy into that, because you're clear it's not working playing big. The two games the Wolves beat OKC in the regular season, they didn't have Julius Randle or Rudy Gobert on the floor, and they beat them by playing small. The fourth quarter of this game, Minnesota outscored the Thunder by 7, albeit in a game that was a blowout for most of the fourth quarter, basically all the fourth quarter. But they started to make some headway there, because while they're trying to play the game that OKC is the best in the league at, Minnesota's still pretty good at playing small and playing frenetically and being physical and aggressive. They can be, but they've gone away from that identity a little bit too much this year. It's not exactly the same team that was giving Jamal Murray, issues last year in the second round of the playoffs, and being aggressive on the perimeter, to that level on both ends of the floor. And again, we saw that in the fourth quarter of this game, and that is something the Wolves should be able to hang their hat on and bring forward into the next game as almost a bit of encouragement that this kind of sort of worked. I want to talk about a couple more things in this one before we get into some individual studs and duds. We'll talk about a bit more about the toughness and physicality, aggressiveness. I want to talk about SGA. I want to talk about three-pointers. We'll talk about like the opposite ends of the spectrum for Mike Conley and Dante DiVincenzo and their very different impacts on the game. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are not only in full swing, we are now in the conference finals on both sides of the bracket, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. Talk about both of those things, almost a game-winning shot. Tyrese Halliburton the other night, man. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. It could be like, hey, the Wolves have to win game 3. Maybe you're looking at Anthony Edwards and what he's going to do in game 3, or you maybe just want to see how things unfold in game 3. You could do a bit of live betting there instead, or I don't know, like maybe it's just you want to take a look at that Pacers-Knicks series, which obviously game 1 was a ton of fun. You could also back up whatever you think with the same game parlay as well. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Okay. So physicality / aggressiveness, playing tough, all of those things are areas in which the Wolves kind of sort of failed in this game. Minnesota's a -4 on the glass. Not great against a team that they're overall bigger than. They were a -1 on the glass. Not a -4, a -1 on the glass. Points in the paint, OKC won it again. Not as drastic as game 1, but they won it by 14 points in this game. I thought that similar to game 1, Rudy Gobert had more of an impact early and defensively. And then as things started to run away from the Wolves, OKC was getting out and running in transition. The Wolves were turning the ball over like crazy. Gobert didn't have a chance to impact the game, and then he was off the floor. And to the point I was making at the end of the first segment, I think playing small isn't necessarily playing into the Thunder's hands, because it turns out OKC likes to play big too. I mean, they start Chet Holmgren, who is fantastic in this game. They start Isaiah Hartenstein, who is a really good player. And I mean, Minnesota got Alex Caruso into foul trouble in this game. And I know that they've got a deep team overall, but I promise you, playing I do think that playing Caruso, Case and Wallace, Aaron Wiggins, like you'd rather get those guys on the floor and get Holmgren and Hartenstein off the floor. I think that that's a more palatable matchup for a small Minnesota team, and nothing says like you're still going to start Rudy. You're still going to basically, and the Wolves pretty much matched his minutes with Isaiah Hartenstein. Like that was kind of the plan, I think. I'm fine with still doing that, but when he's off the floor, there's no reason to have Rudy on the floor. And this is not playing Rudy off the floor. It's what's going to give us the best chance in this particular matchup, because Rudy had an impact when he was on the court. I thought overall, like the on-off numbers for the season have proven that. The on-off numbers for the playoffs have proven that. Wasn't as good in this particular game, but he was also on the floor with some other guys that had pretty bad performances as well. And the overall small ball lineup for Minnesota is what made that impact late. And I think Minnesota should at least give that some consideration, especially now that we're pretty much in break glass in case of emergency territory for the Wolves. Which, by the way, speaking of break glass in case of emergency, the other thing the Wolves did in the fourth quarter, besides just being a little more physical and playing harder on both ends of the floor, was they did the thing where they load up on SGA, and it worked to cut the deficit from 24 to 10. And then J-Dub hit a 3, and I think Dort hit a 3. Like, they're eventually OKC hit threes. And it was fluky that they went like 0 for 14 in the fourth quarter of that game in February, whatever that number was. They missed all those threes in a row, the non-SGA players. But like, what's actually going to, like, they're not going to make out all of them either. And you'd still rather live and die. It's basically the same thing the Thunder are doing with the Wolves offense. OKC's made the calculated decision that, hey, we're going to cut off the paint. We're going to make Jaden McDaniels make corner threes. We're going to make Naz Reid knock down. Like, over the course of the season, these guys did those things at least to at a good enough clip. This is a different animal, and it's magnified now. We saw Naz miss a wide open 3 when it was still like a 14-point game in the third quarter. And then I think Conley missed an open 3 from the corner. Like, there were too many of these just wide open threes that Minnesota missed. And that's the thing that OKC is allowing them to do. And if Minnesota wants to pick and choose and completely load up and sell out on SGA, and I know it feels gimmicky, and I know the Wolves want to go toe-to-toe and play them straight up, but at least what we've seen so far, they're not good enough to do that compared to OKC. I'm not at all taking anything away from Minnesota. The Wolves are fantastic. They're in the conference finals. OKC is a completely different animal than anybody the Wolves have faced. They're the best team in the NBA. And if the right thing to do is to sell out to try and stop the MVP and make Lou Dort and Aaron Wiggins and Kenrich Williams and, whoever else, even Jalen Williams, I don't care who it is, anybody but SGA, if you're going to make them make semi-open threes, that seems to be very similar to what OKC is doing on the other end of the floor. And maybe you're not as good at it as OKC. That's fine. But then, there's other factors at play here too. In theory, Julius Randle is a better second option than J-Dub. I'm not saying that that's for sure the case. I mean, we're talking about, but the Randle that we saw in the Lakers series and the Warriors series is. And so I think Minnesota needs to be more willing to sell out and play that more sort of a gimmicky type of defense, especially now that they're down 2-0. It's worked to the tune of that comeback in February, and I know it's not February. I know it's playoff basketball. It worked to an extent in the fourth quarter of this game. Pair that with a physicality and an aggressiveness, and Minnesota could potentially then force a few more Thunder turnovers, which would be awesome as well. I mean, they only had 8 turnovers in this game. After only have, OKC, I think, had like 13 in game 1. They had 8 in game 2. The Wolves only managed to get 2 steals in this game. I just think that activity level on the perimeter needs to be ramped up if you're the Timberwolves. And again, Minnesota's turnovers weren't really a big deal until that third quarter run, and then it snowballed, and that's how OKC gets you. In terms of an offensive adjustment, so one thing I think they could try the Wolves could try that should be fairly simple, and we've seen them do this at times this year, is get Jaden McDaniels out of the corner. He's been confident enough offensively, even off the dribble. Like, I mean, you look up and Jaden McDaniels finished this game with 22 points on 15 shots. 4 of 8 outside the arc, 3 blocks in this game for Jaden McDaniels. He was active. I thought he played really well. Why not include him in some pick and roll actions? Why not have him as the screener and get him out of the corner where there's not so much pressure on him to just knock down corner threes, which he did a couple, he 4 of 8. Like, that's fine. But again, OKC is going to live and die with that. And apparently not die at all. Just live with it because it's working. But getting Jaden out of the corner and using him at the top of the circle, I think, might actually make some sense. That should be a relatively simple adjustment. And maybe it's Conley brings the ball up, Ant starts off the ball, and then you run the action with Ant and McDaniels, and Conley heads to the corner. Conley's a good 3-point shooter from the corner, and he's going to bring value there. I do want to talk about Conley in a minute. I want to briefly hit the officiating thing and the SGA, Jaden McDaniels' shove on SGA. It was a flagrant foul, obviously. Like, fine. It's a bad look. It's a frustration, situation. But you know exactly why he did it. SGA was starting to hook him. And Jaden was like, I'm not doing this again. I'm not going to get hooked again and have this never be called. Like, literally never in this series has this been called. So as soon as SGA started to hook him, he just shoved him. It's a bad play. He shouldn't have done it. It's a bad look. It hurt his team. It's really kind of childish. But that's exactly what happened. And that is what the Wolves are so sick and tired of, is the SJ hook not being called. Because it's all you do if you're SGA, as soon as you put your head and shoulders past the guy, you hook them, and they're stuck on your hip. I'm not talking about hooking with the off arm, which he does as well, but hooking, behind the back. If you watch that replay, he's got his hand on Jaden's back, and Jaden just says, screw this, I'm going to shove it. Again, I'll say it for the 5th time. It's the wrong thing to do. No doubt. I'm not advocating for it. I'm not excusing it. But that is what the frustration was. It wasn't he keeps beating me. It's he keeps hooking me. As soon as he puts his head past me, he's hooking me, and the officials can't see it. And then they're seeing the rest of the contact and saying, okay, that's a blocking foul. That's what's getting the Wolves so frustrated. And it is frustrating. And again, I know OKC was called for more fouls. I know the Wolves shot more free throws. That escalated in the fourth quarter when the game was a little bit out of hand for a while there. So for whatever that's worth, that's how that went down. I don't know. And I'll say what I said the other day on the show. If you foul a team 40 times, you get called 22 times. The other team only commits 30 fouls and they're called 20 times. OKC committed more than that many fouls. They were just only called for 22. It's the old, they can't call everything approach. And kudos to them for doing it and getting away with it. It's working. It's obviously not the only reason they're winning these games by double figures. The Wolves missed a ton of open threes. We've talked about that. We talked about all the other issues Minnesota's had already. So all that to say, it's still frustrating. I want to touch on 2 more quick things. We'll hit studs and duds, and that's how we'll close the show today. All right, I mentioned 3-point shooting at the end of the last segment. In game one, Minnesota shot 29.4% from three. And I said, they're not going to shoot that. Like, they might have one other stinker like this in the series, but that's not something that's going to keep happening. They shot 28.2% on threes. They shot 12 less threes. They made 4 less threes. So we'll just round it to make it simple. 29% in game one, 28% in game two. It's not going to cut it. They've got to, like, Naz was 0 for 5 a game after going 0 for 7 on threes. Naz Reid is 0 for 12 in the series on three-pointers. That can't happen if the Wolves have a shot at all to win this series. 0 for 12 through 2 games. Ant was 1 of 9 in this game. He was one of the few guys that was decent in game one outside the arc. Randle was 0 for 3. Conley was 1 for 4. McDaniels 4 for 8 was the only guy that was above. Nikhil, I guess, is 3 for 4. But the three-point shooting, just miserable for the Wolves. We talked already about points in the paint. We talked about turnover issues cropping up at the worst possible time. Game one, I felt pretty confident that if the Wolves just shot threes a little bit better, they would have won. This one, I thought the defense, the point of attack defense, actually, this isn't too different from game one either. As soon as the Thunder got a bit of a lead, it's like the Wolves' point of attack defense got softer. And the opposite should happen. Okay, studs and duds. I want to start here with the Mike Conley, Dante DiVincenzo piece. Dante was a minus 27 in 22 minutes. I'm not a huge single game individual player plus minus guy, but when you're a minus 27 in 22 minutes and you score 8 points on 8 shots, man. And Ant was a minus 22. He missed a lot of threes. I thought the defense was spotty, but Dante was just really bad. He had 4 turnovers. Ant had 0 turnovers, by the way. Dante had 4 turnovers, 3 assists, shot 3 of 8, was a minus 27. On the flip side of that coin, Mike Conley was a plus 14 in 28 minutes. I thought Conley was better defensively than DiVincenzo. For whatever reason, the Wolves decided to have DiVincenzo chase SGA basically whenever he was on the floor. And he did chase him, but he was always kind of left in SGA's dust. He was stuck on his hip off the ball when he was in front of him. He just wasn't big enough to get a solid contest off on SGA. He was maybe a little bit better at not being called for fouls, certainly better than Jaden McDaniels, but it's because he's not long enough to be close enough to be called for fouls. Dante just is not, it's not a winning strategy to put DiVincenzo on SGA. You can put DiVincenzo on, whoever the third option is out there for OKC in any given moment, and feel okay about that. Like, put him on Alex Caruso or whatever. Like, that's fine. He's a good defender, but he's not big enough to guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander without committing fouls without allowing him to just shoot over him. And he's not staying in front of him. He's not using his quickness to his advantage either. So DiVincenzo, to me, is a dud in this game. I thought he was the worst player for the Wolves by far. And Mike Conley, I'm not giving him a stud because he shot 1 of 6, but he's important to what the Wolves are doing, to what the Wolves are trying to do, with how clunky the offense has been. And he should shoot the ball better than 1 of 4 in this game. And what did he shoot? 1 of 5 in the first game. So Conley's 2 of 9 in this series. Like, he's another guy who is generally lethal from the corners. I think he was like 48% from the corners in the regular season. He should be on the floor and off the ball a little bit more, bringing the ball up, dumping it to Ant, initiating the action, getting to the corner. And then he's the guy OKC's leaving in the corner instead of it being Jaden McDaniels. Maybe McDaniels in the action at the top of the circle and Conley goes and stands in the corner. That, to me, is the best usage for Mike Conley. Studs for the Wolves, got to still give one to Ant, 32, 9, and 6. He was aggressive in this game. He shot 11 of 17 on twos, which is fine. He got to the line 10 times, 7 of 10 at the line. That's fine. It's good. So 6 assists, no turnovers. I thought the defense wasn't great, and obviously the shooting was a problem. I mean, Ant for the series now, like, he was 1 of 9 in this game. He was 3 of 8 in game one, so he's 4 of 17 from 3. Like, obviously that's worse than 25%. We know he's a better shooter than that. He gets a stud in this game. Jaden gets a stud, 22 points on 15 shots, 3 blocks, only 2 rebounds, which isn't great, but I thought overall he was good in this game. And I said before the series, if the Wolves are going to win the series, he's the non-star that's going to have to be awesome. And then my last one is Nikhil Alexander-Walker. He was great. A big part of the fourth quarter push for the Wolves, 17 points on 8 shots, 3 of 4 outside the arc, 2 assists, couple rebounds, at least 1 phantom foul on his cousin, where he backed away and for whatever reason, SJ still gets the foul call. But I thought Alexander Walker was really good. he hasn't been great in these playoffs. This was certainly one of his better games. Naz, I thought, played well. He had 10 and 8. He was 0-5 on threes, but he was 3 of 3 on twos, hit a couple of tough post shots, 2 blocks in this game. Naz Reid played much better. And hopefully that can maybe fuel the 3-point shot. He shoots the three so well at home. So hopefully the home crowd could get Naz going and he can have a really good shooting night at Target Center on Saturday night. For me, the biggest adjustments the Wolves need to make the open threes they're giving you. Be more physical on the perimeter early in the shot clock. I'm not saying be more physical when SGA gets below the 3-point line. Be more physical on the perimeter. Make them feel you. And if the officials decide to call it really tight, that should hurt the Thunder as well. It should have a negative impact on what OKC is trying to do. And if you set that tone early, and they should be able to do it at home on Saturday night, then you've got a shot at holding the officials accountable, if you will, to how OKC is getting officiated on the other end of the floor. And you have the added benefit and really the goal of creating some turnovers and making the Thunder uncomfortable on the perimeter, forcing the ball at SGA's hands early in the shot clock. Those are all things the Wolves can do better and need to do better in Game 3 on Saturday. Of course, Game 3 is Saturday night at Target Center, 7:30. It's on ABC. I'll be back. I'll have the post-game pod on Sunday. I'll post it probably Sunday afternoon, evening. So it'll be kind of in between the two games. The live postcast will be at Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube as always. And if you missed the postcast from Thursday night, that's the episode before this in the audio feed. They do it on the Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube, both Luke and Jack, and then that audio is here on this feed. They'll be live following Wolves Thunder Game 3 on Saturday as well. And then my show will post, as I said, late on Sunday for Monday. And then we'll get you ready for Monday night's Game 4, also from Target Center. Otherwise, that's all I got for you today in this one. I mean, the Wolves obviously goes without saying have to win Game 3. If you win Game 3, you're like, okay, we're holding serve. Everybody, home team wins every game. We can win Game 4, push it to a 3-game series. Obviously, at that point, 2 games in OKC in this, what becomes a 3-game series. But you have to win Game 3. You lose Game 3, you're looking at best case a gentleman's sweep at that point is what it'll feel like. It'll look a lot like that Mavs series from last year, or exactly like the Mavs series from last year. So you got to win. You got to win Game 3 at home and give yourselves a shot to win Game 4 on Monday, Memorial Day, to tie the series heading back to OKC with what would be a Wednesday night game next week. All right, that's all we got for you today here on the show. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that for your second listen, you can watch or check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.